Okay, there's been a few discoveries here over the last couple of weeks in Karahan Tepe and Gobekli Tepe. Two different sites, two different findings, and we'll take a look at both of them here. Karahan Tepe is that gigantic site that we look at here that has the concrete terrazzo floor in it. And it's much bigger than you actually think as far as a complex of even itself that goes on. As you can tell, they've started digging out more and more of it here, and they find these loops go out and down this hill, down that hill, and one wonders how big it is whenever it totally gets excavated. But people have gone around there and found that it's got a span of about 4 miles across. So it's a little wider than you would think of. In fact, where the site that we're looking at there is here, it encompassed an area all around itself like that. And the blue area is just the excavation so far. But one could easily look over and realize that there probably would have been little village hamlets all tucked in all over this place if they could get a good look at it. The thing that always comes to mind, though, is that none of that would be there anymore if it was exposed at all, and if it wasn't ever buried totally up under a hill like all these other sites are, then there wouldn't be anything left. In fact, I've said before, if some of these sites had been found in the past, they may not exist anymore, or you might find just a remnant and so on. We're actually real lucky that they buried it in such a way, because if it wasn't done like it was, then we wouldn't even have this to look at. It's something that we've been talking about, though, for years and years. My whole life, people have talking about this idea of this, don't let me use the word Atlantis, but effectively somewhere around the last ice age, there was an advanced civilization, and everything went to crap so bad that we almost had to start over. When you look at the time of these places being 11 or 12,000 years ago, and you compare it to the time that Egypt seems to pop up just like popcorn, and Sumeria before that slightly popping up like popcorn, and all these other places around, it makes you wonder, because this has got a 7,000 year gap on that. And they're showing you things like Stonehenge and archaeoastronomy and all kinds of things that are attached to it. It's pretty incredible whenever you take a look at it. And of course, these sites really are spread out across the whole Anatolia area here. There's a real good depiction of it that you can see here. And that's Karahan Tepe. Most people know what Gobekli Tepe looks like, and they found something in Enclosure D when they were finishing it off. So here's one of the sites at Karahan Tepe, or the new artifacts that's here. There's a portal loop that's here. There are two pillars on either side of it. They both seem somewhat cracked and having to be held together. But then if you'll look right down here, there's a depiction of a vulture or a buzzard. And there's part of it that's painted here too, and showing a paint on it. And the other thing that we'll show you actually has some paint on it, and it's starting to make people think different things about this. But right here beside it is someone sitting, and I'm guessing, and a couple of people have said already, that he's not just emaciated, he's not a vampire or something going into Halloween right now, but he appears to be dead. But whenever he's dead also, he has a fallus here, which was apparently knocked off, but they took some chewing gum stuff and stuck it back on for the pictures. So this is pretty interesting, showing you all these different artifacts that are here, and I'm guessing that they'll take and try to replace this whole facade that's here in the Gobekli Tepe Museum that they have going on now. It's pretty cool. They've got a full setup there of basically what it looks like, and you can walk around in it. It kind of seems like it's set up for you should see that area first and then choose the sites you're going to go see. And they're setting it up too to where there are trips and tours that go there, and you get it to look even at more at one site than another, or a group of them in a day. And you might go one day here and one day over there and so on. Pretty interesting. But this statue here, when it was found, it was broken. Just like you can see, this is all held together here, but you can tell how it was together at one time. And he's broken at the waist, and they said broken in two. And then there's an asterisk because his erect penis was knocked off, so that'd have to count to it. And you can kind of see his hairline that's here, and the fact that he's got a beard that flows down and over and almost has a point to it, and then more of a flat beard here and here. Yeah, so this looks like something to do with resurrection and that type of concept. And you can see they've exaggerated his ribs here, so that shows you another thing too. And there are some markings here that are on these other pillars that are on either side of the portal. And then right by the portal, to let you know what this is all about here, is again a vulture, what we would call a buzzard here in the southwest. And whenever you see them, you know something's been hit by a car or something went down somewhere. And they seem to be circling it and coming down. That's something that's been holy for a long time. I've talked about how they have descriptions of going up to 30,000 years at least, where there's this idea of putting the people on a dais and letting the birds peck and take them away and take them up to heaven, and ideas like that that were already in place. And this appears to be something to do with the death ritual that's going on here. Now one wonders what happened to him after this point, and do they bury him in certain places? And is there a place, perhaps even within view of this place, where they would have been buried at? Kind of crazy to think about. But again, that got knocked off, thick as a beer can, ladies. But it's been put back on here. And you can see that there's some red paint. I don't know if it'll show up on the camera here, some red ochre that's on it. So all of this appears to have been painted somewhat, and this starts making you think quite a bit different things. Here's a black and white photo, and even though it's kicked on its side, it has a look to him here a little bit. Yeah, you can tell there's a chip knocked out of it and so on, but showing his throat and his shoulders and collarbone and everything real exaggerated. I would think this person is already dead, or easily on the edge of it. But with what goes on and the ceremonial things that are shown here, it looks like that's what that's about. Is it just me, or does he look a little like Woody Harrelson? So here's another picture of the side, and you can see where the beard comes down, right? In the front of the beard here too, but you can also see the hairstyle and how the guy had a semi-mullet, parted hair. So that's interesting too. All of it's really quite interesting. More interesting than that to me is the fact that there's a hill that kind of looks like this one, right there in the distance if you'll look. And I wonder if that has something to do with it too. Wonder if they had a burial center someplace that they would put the people at that went through this ritual. Who knows? Who knows what we can find out over time. But here's this guy that's been found, a human statue and everything. And so apparently, and it's been painted, and these other ones were too. So apparently this is of the earliest painted statuaries that ever were. A lot of people don't know that a lot of the Greek and Roman statues that we see today, and they just look like marble, and that's what we've taken it for, and it has a beauty of its own. But they actually used to paint these things, which in some cases it looks like it takes away from it somewhat, but it also shows you how grandiose that would look, especially with some of these colorful outfits that they put on them and so on, and of course making the colors that end up working with it and so on. So it's pretty cool and pretty interesting. So that guy reminds me of this guy that we found at Karahan Tepe here recently. I did a video on, in fact, the last video I did about this statuary site, showing you that there's two lions coming at this guy, almost a master of beasts, but he's got his hand on his phallus, looking very much like that concept or idea. I wonder if that has to do with this same ceremony and this same idea spread across. If we get into other ones, of course, maybe you'll find that there are a few other deifications like this, and the vulture, like the vulture stone we found at Gobekli Tepe, and all the connections that try to go with that. Where they say he's holding the sun in his hand, or is that the comet coming down, or is the comet coming down the big snake that's on the thing there? It's got those handbags all onto it. Shows Scorpio that's there, but the bird, that's a raven, or not a raven, that's a buzzard, or a animal of death as we know it. So it's pretty cool they've got these connections, and these aren't the only phallus objects they found. They found a few different ones of them. You can see the facial structure of this guy. This is hand-sized or whatever, but it again has the same effigy type thing onto it. And even Urfa Man himself apparently had that going on. And you can see the hands around the waist and the V collar that reminds me of Star Trek somehow, but here we go. So all these places I just mentioned, they're really just these four that we can see here, but in actuality, there are like 14 sites that are around, and then they've mentioned 2 others that are right close to other sites that they already knew about, and those apparently aren't in the mix yet. So it looks like it might go up to 16. At one time I was like, wouldn't it be cool if we ended up finding 12 of them for that sacred geometry number? But it looks like these are almost within shot of each other. And so you'd have to say, well, when there are places that are mixed up, look around, there's got to be another one and another one and so on. And of course the people that lived in the Fertile Valley here back in the day or whatever were probably the ones that were farming and helping all these places out, and in the high places, as they said in ancient times. So pretty cool, ledge, bench, everything on there, and again you can see that vulture thing that's there, and we'll get to the painting part of it here in just a second. But here's the head laying down whenever they're finally excavating it and getting ready to pull it out. And here's a shot of it with and without, because it was broken off. And you can kind of see on the left, well, it's almost poking out of the shot here, but yeah, same type of thing. It was broke off before, and then they've glued it back on now. So, ta-da! But here's that vulture here that we're looking at. And we see the painted area behind him, but you can see the vulture depiction that looks just like the other one, but it's a 3D statue. That's pretty cool. Seeing it goes with this ceremonial thing too, that looks like a death and rebirth situation with a portal that's supposed to take you up, start you out with this concept that goes on. Wonder if I'll ever find a burial ground that's associated with this, but there were a few skulls found with this, and one wonders if they look at the petrious bone area, if they might even be able to get some DNA out of it to be able to show who these people are. Through my archaeology here, and of course recently you've seen a few videos that are making connections to people that are all over this area preemptive to this, already having R1B genetics and so on too, and it wouldn't surprise me a bit if it wasn't R1B or E1, which eventually arrived from CT, or a few other ones. Ones also that might be associated with a Cro-Magnon type people at their later stage, coming into our modern people now, although they've renamed them early European modern humans because they do still exist today, and the haplogroup's even still here, so it's not that much difference. Now the other site here, and it was found in enclosure D, that's the famous one with the vulture stone and so on that we're talking about, and it's a boar, and it's almost life size. and they can see inside of its mouth. We'll take a closer look in a second. Inside of its mouth, it's painted with red ochre, and then it's also painted white and black blotches all over it. That some of it's still there. And by doing that, they looked around, and oh, right behind them, there's some that's been painted also too, with some symbology that very little, if none of it's left. But if we started looking around, we'd probably find something pretty cool. There's a look inside the mouth, and you can see a bit of red ochre, and he doesn't look too happy, but I guess a good depiction. You can see on his chin the black and white. Now the boar here is found in its own enclosure, which looks like it has a similar idea, something to go along with that. So we'll have to look in that deeper with mythologies and things and see if that goes with it. Also in that same enclosure, we can see the fox pelt here on the side of it and the hands that go down. And if we look where it is, there's this bench that's below it that has one of those H-block looking things. And then it has two snakes coming together, one facing one way, one facing another. Not like an Ouroboros, but the other depictions I've shown you before. And the boar here with his red paint in his mouth. Hopefully you can see it in this picture here pretty good zoomed in. One would have thought maybe he had something in his eyes at one time and so on too. So this vulture symbology, apparently, like a lot of people thought right off the bat in seeing that, has connections to the ancient death cult concept idea and the afterlife and so on, hooking up through the Milky Way. But now realizing these things could have been painted, they might have looked different, something like this. And one would like to think that this pattern here, geometric pattern, would have been done in two separate colors. Oh, maybe reds and blacks, white highlights, and so on. But so yeah, two pretty decent finds here. One again at Karahan Tepe that we're all familiar with. The other at Gobekli Tepe that we should be even more familiar with. But you know, I still find people today that don't know that there's more than one site that they found, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's they've dug like 11 of them, but they say that there's like 14, and then somebody said whenever they were preemptively looking at those sites that they saw others. So